Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews and to another review video here on the channel. I'm going to be chatting about a new release for 2024 because of some more scheduling questions. Today I'm going to talk to you about Sydney J. Shields' The Honey Witch. I haven't made notes for this, I haven't got a script to follow, I'm just going to be talking from the heart about my feelings on this book. I'm trying to vaguely remember my review video structure, so here we go. Quick disclaimers, that's where we start. I was sent this copy of this book for free from the publisher, regardless of where books come from. Nobody's paying me to talk about books except my patrons, and all opinions are my own. I will keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible. I am going to be talking about the book as a whole. If you would like to go in knowing absolutely nothing, pause the video, come back when you've read it and we'll talk then. And I will link the story graph for the book down below in case you want to check out any user-generated content warnings. I will also say that the book has content warnings at the start, which is a point for the book. There is a big old list of content warnings right before the first page. The Honey Witch is a romantic fantasy historical book from author Sydney J. Shields. Worth noting, because we're going to get into it, Sydney J. Shields is an American author. And this book came out in May of this year, significantly very near to the release of the latest season of Bridgerton. Just for a historical fantasy romance energy, I think that's worth noting as well. I shall read to you from the blurb. The Honey Witch is cursed to never find true love, but when she meets a woman who doesn't believe in magic, she dares to hope for more. Marigold Claude has always preferred the company of meadow spirits to the suitors who've tried to woo her, so when her grandmother whisks her away to the tiny isle of Innisfree with an offer to train her as the next Honey Witch, she accepts immediately. But her newfound magic and independence come with a price. No one can fall in love with the Honey Witch. When Lottie Burke, a notoriously grumpy skeptic who doesn't believe in magic, shows up at her doorstep, Marigold can't resist the challenge to prove to her that magic is real, even at the risk of losing her heart. An unmissable tale of sweet magic and love overcoming all. You can see the cover, you think it's cute, you know what we're getting in for. We can know what we're being advertised. It's a sapphic love story with some kind of cottagecore witch elements to it. I'll start with what I liked. I like that this is a queer norm world. I always appreciate particularly a historical book that decides to just say, yep, that's absolutely fine. You can be in love with a woman. Men can be in love with men. We visit balls. We see couples who are together. I appreciated it. I liked that element. I liked Marigold as a main character. I think I liked Lottie a little bit more. I thought she was a bit more interesting. And I think this is one of the rare occurrences where I might have been interested in a book that was dual point of view, just because I felt like Lottie had a lot of interesting backstory that we didn't necessarily get to explore in detail. However, Marigold, a good character, an interesting character, a little bit flat at times, perhaps, but broadly speaking, I couldn't really complain about her too much, right? That's what that is. I think probably the biggest selling point of this book is that it kind of does what you would expect it to do, which is be that kind of fairly, I'm trying not to be rude, fairly non-controversial, fantasy romance book for you to read and enjoy, with little witchy bee elements to it that are fun, that are nice. There's a reason people like that kind of book. I also like that kind of book sometimes. Which begs the question, why didn't this book work? What was it about this book that in a lot of ways annoyed me? And let's get into it. I'm going to cover all of this with, this is very much my personal opinion. I don't think this is a bad book for everybody. Just, I want to talk about how this is a book that I personally didn't enjoy. And if you absolutely love this book, I'm so here for you. That's wonderful. And I do think there will be people who really love this. We're talking about it from my perspective. Don't yell at me in the comments, I'm very fragile. Okay, so setting-wise, I think part of what bothered me is it's a historical setting, it's 1830s. They establish it's the 1830s, and yet we are in a fantasy world, both of which are totally fine. And that we start off in Bardshire, which is very clearly meant to be like a British county. However, it's not real, and the island of Innisfree is not real, and if you Google Innisfree, you get a makeup company. So it was confusing as to why the historical aspect of it mattered and why put a year on it that would be relevant to a calendar date in this world. That was confusing to me. I think what I mean is that it was never super relevant which time period we were in, other than in the fashions and arguably kind of the courtship idea. So that would put us in Georgian England, but it's never really relevant, and I guess that bothered me because I sort of wanted either more history and more research or just throw that out the window and make it a fantasy world. That would make more sense to me. And I think it's never totally clear what level of magic we're dealing with in terms of, is this a magic that everybody understands? Is the idea of a honey witch something that everyone would understand? Is it that actually it's all intentions? And in some books that's interesting. In some books it's worth exploring what is real magic and what is intent and manifestation and all of this stuff. But this book kind of didn't do either. It just went, she's incredibly magically powerful, and also people can just choose not to believe in that, and that's fine. Which maybe is interesting. Maybe that's an interesting angle to it. I didn't feel that way about it. I also personally felt like Lottie and Mary didn't have that much chemistry, and this is me saying it. I love a sapphic love story. I'm here for it. I just didn't love most of their interactions. I think there are some lovely moments. There's some really good writing in bits of this. I don't personally, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, so I'll put a spoiler skip. I don't personally find the idea of getting a spur-of-the-moment tattoo on a moving vessel with presumably no ability to sterilize anything that romantic. I don't think I would be feeling seduced in that moment. I think I would be feeling like I'd be concerned for my open wound that I have. But maybe that's just me. I think a lot of my criticisms of this book could very easily be hand-waved, and I think it's the problem / just one of the products of this kind of writing, where it is a fantasy book, and almost everything can be waved away with, well, we're in a fantasy, and we're in a very specifically a romance fantasy. And that comes with an awful lot of hand-waving of logistics and hand-waving of, well, of course it just works that way because it's a romance book, and of course her tattoo wouldn't get infected, it's a romance book. And this isn't a romance in the very traditional sense, but obviously it's drawing on a lot of those ideas. But for me personally, I want to get into those logistics. This book is long enough that it can get into those logistics, and even if you handwave it with, she puts some magical honey on it and it solves all of her problems, maybe that would be better. I think everything just felt pretty shallow to me, as in not a lot of depth, and I'm sure the author did a bunch of research, but none of it really mattered because we're not actually in a historical period, and maybe did some interesting stuff to do with plants and their properties, but it sort of didn't really come through in the text, at least for me. And overall, I just ended up feeling like the book was fine, but could have been very good, and mostly just sort of sat in the, okay, I guess, place in my shelves. I wanted this to be a very fun, casual, nice romance book with that like Language of Flowers things, and it is that, but it isn't that in the way that I wanted it to be. It doesn't quite pull it off, in my opinion. I think a small portion of that, I don't want to get too much into this because I think it gets a little bit weird and sort of snooty, but I think there is an element of the American idea of that period of time in England, and the American idea of like the English countryside and that kind of thing. And I'll say, they never mention that this is England, right? But it's obviously alluding to that. At least in my opinion, it's alluding to that. And maybe that's because I'm reading it from here. But yeah, it didn't feel like it really worked. It's sort of like when you read a book about a place that you have been a lot and the person writing the book clearly has never been, and just things aren't quite sitting right, and it feels a little bit uncanny. If somebody asked me what they should read, what would be worth reading, I would recommend a number of people. I would recommend, if someone asked me for what I wanted out of this book, if there were other books that did give me that, right? That's probably a better answer, because maybe this just wasn't specifically what I wanted, and that's not what the author was trying to achieve. Let's allow for that idea. To get what I wanted, I would recommend A.D. Hart, who is a personal friend, but just who writes the most lovely, coziest, wonderful romance with great chemistry between characters. Yes. I would recommend The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, which coincidentally we are going to be talking about next week, so stay tuned for that. And sapphic romance, cozy witchy sapphic romance. And I would maybe recommend The Ruthless Lady's Guide to Wizardry, which I think is a fun time and does a lot of things that I wanted this book to do more of, perhaps. Obviously, it's your prerogative whether you like this book. I think it's hopefully coming through quite clearly that I didn't. I ended up not liking it very much and sort of feeling a little bit resentful towards it, which is maybe unfair, and perhaps I should, lay off a little bit, maybe. But you know what? I never really talk about books that I don't like, so here is an example of how I talk about books that I don't like for you. Have you read The Honey Witch? Have you read anything similar? Have you had any disappointing reads lately? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also come hang out on Discord, where we have chill chats about books. I'd like to say an enormous thank you to all the ghosts who haunt me over on Patreon. They support the channel and in return get early access to videos, bonus content, live streams, and more. If you'd like to join their number, that's linked below as well. Thank you so much to you for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. It's gonna be some bloopers now. I'm trying to stay to the positives. What time period is 1830s? That's probably worth looking up.